Hello, everybody. I have a short and sweet episode for you today, but two really good questions. They're pretty different from each other, but very interesting stuff. In the first one, somebody's wondering when the right time to say I love you is in a romantic relationship, but they have a few details that make it a little bit more complicated, which we dive into, and I give my advice about that. The second one is related to somebody whose mother had a traumatic brain injury, and now they're experiencing numbness in their face and in their mouth. So I give some reasons why that might be happening and some things to look into for that. So yeah, enjoy the episode. This is the Hardcore Self-Help Podcast. I'm your host, Dr. Robert Duff. I'm a clinical psychologist and a self-help author from Southern California. My goal is to make mental health content for real people, just like you. And in this show, I answer your questions or dive deep into topics related to life, psychology, mental health, relationships, and more. Please be aware that sometimes I use some spicy language, and I also don't shy away from sensitive topics, but I will try to give you a content warning whenever it's relevant. So if all this sounds good to you, let's get started. All right. Hello, friends of all varieties. This is episode 393. Thank you so much for being here. Just as a quick reminder, I have all the show notes for each episode up on my website at duffthepsych.com, including any links that I talk about. And there's a nice little rough summary, not exactly a transcript, but going through all the main points of what I discuss in the episode there. So if you need to review or find an episode that you had heard in the past, you can just go to the website. The search bar works well for that as well. And also on the website, you can submit a question for the show, or you can send me an email to duffthepsych@gmail.com. If you're looking for a particular episode, it's just duffthepsych.com/episode XYZ. So in this case, it would be /episode 393. I hope that you're doing well. I had a crazy day. I'm really happy to be able to sit for a minute and talk with you guys and get this recorded. It was just one of those days where it's like bam, 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 one thing after another. Had a unexpected case come up where I had to drive an hour to go make a house call, and the person didn't show up for an hour. And this was like for the county. So it was somebody who was, self-neglecting, and they really need some help. And, they didn't show up for an hour. Then they get there and they're super defensive, which is normal. So it took some talking, and then we finally got to, do the assessment, but that meant it took a long time. And so then I had to go run to just find a random coffee shop to go jump on a 2-hour meeting, like this interdisciplinary meeting that I'm a part of. And right as the meeting was ending, my phone died. And then I had to go hop onto another meeting right after that and find somewhere to plug in, and yada, yada, yada. I got home, more stuff. So I've been going nonstop since 7 o'clock this morning. So like I said, this is actually a nice break to sit and talk with you. I really appreciate the time, and I hope that wherever you are, you're taking a moment for yourself, whether you're driving, whether you're just sitting down and listening, whether you're washing dishes, whether you're on a walk. I appreciate your attention, and yeah, let's just go ahead and jump into it. I'll stop being mushy now. Here's the first question. Greetings, Dr. Duff, longtime reader and listener of your work. Thank you for all you create and share with the world. You're very welcome. My question is there an appropriate time to say I love you, to first say I love you in a romantic relationship? Some personal context. I grew up in a few different cultures, and in many languages, there exist multiple ways to say I love you, different levels or connotations, when in English, we only have this one. I am on the autism spectrum and don't always understand social conventions. If the relationship were platonic, I would have told this person I love them a long while ago. I added the long part. They just said a while ago. Have an amazing day. So thank you for writing in, and thank you for your longtime support. I really appreciate you. And this is a great question. I would say that this is a question that many people have, right? When is it appropriate to say I love you in a relationship, a romantic relationship? For somebody that was born and raised here in the US, unlike what you're describing, this is still something that I've grappled with for sure, be that during adolescence or even more recently in relationships as an adult. But for you, you have some added layers of complexity. You mentioned that you grew up in different cultures and they have different linguistic, backgrounds and conventions. And so there are different levels of, say, intensity or different types of love that are easy to reference. Whereas for us, we have to modify these things, right? We have the word love, and we might say platonic love, or we might say romantic love, or, yeah, I'm hard pressed to think of other types. I know there are familial love, whatever. It's not as easy in English. You have to work your way around it, and it's kind of clunky. You also mentioned that you are autistic, which means that it might be a little bit more difficult for you to determine what is sort of an expected statement or the expected course of things in a relationship, right? What is society expecting you to do? What are the nonverbals that might be telling you that it's time to do something? That's going to work out differently for you than it would for me, being that I'm not autistic, right? So the short answer here is that there is no answer. And there's going to be a lot of that in my response here. But, there's no answer as to when saying I love you is appropriate in a relationship. In fact, it's a really funny quirk, right? I grew up here in the US, and in this society, it's a funny quirk that when you're friends with somebody, you can totally let the word love fly, right? You can say, oh, I love you so much, blah, blah, blah. But as soon as you start seeing them in a romantic context, then suddenly you have to withhold that. Like, I can remember these distinct times in which I've accidentally said, I love you, as a reflex to somebody that I was seeing romantically when we hadn't yet exchanged these sort of I love yous in a romantic sense, right? It just sort of blurted out. It came out because it's a normal thing to say to somebody that you are hanging out with a lot and that you care about. I can't remember exact, specific examples, but something like, see, this is why I love you, right? That would totally be normal to say to a friend. But in this context, it's like, see, this is exactly why I love you. Love, and you sort of bite your tongue and feel awkward about that, which is so silly. It's just really, it is a weird thing. So I hear where you're coming from, even if I don't have those same kind of backgrounds that you have and I'm not autistic. Please know that just, simply for people who are neurotypical, there still is no clear delineation of when it's right to say that you love someone. It's not just, you not seeing the delineation that's there. There really isn't one. So it's hard. And even the feeling of love is somewhat subjective. To share, a personal example with my girlfriend, who I have been with for about 2 years now. Actually, as I'm recording this, tomorrow will be our 2-year, dating anniversary. So shout out, babe. She doesn't listen, so she's not going to hear that. But yeah, it's been about 2 years. And I told her that I loved her first. And at that time when I said it, she wasn't ready yet. She didn't want to say that back. And in the moment, the way it played out was she could see that I was feeling big feelings. She could see it in my face. And she asked me to tell her what was happening. She's like, you're feeling things. What's going on? And I was like, okay, well, I think I'm falling in love with you. And she was like, falling? She was, she knew. And I was like, no, you're right. I think I love you. And, what happens in the fairy tales and in the shows, it's like, oh my God, I love you too. I'm so glad you said it. I was waiting for you to say it. And in her case, she was like, is it all right that I don't feel ready to say that? And it was totally fine, right? Of course that's okay. That's a much better response than recoiling or something. But, obviously it's not the same as coming back and saying it right back, but totally valid, right? She's like, is it okay that I don't feel ready to say that yet? And I said, absolutely. I don't expect you to. And you don't have to feel any pressure to, but I just wanted you to know that's true for me. And she was very happy that it was true for me, but it was just, not time for her to say that. And so we continued on, and at this point in our relationship, we say it 50,000 times a day. It's absolutely disgusting. So yeah, it doesn't always have to work out the way that you see it work out in movies. Perhaps a good step here, a first step, is to challenge yourself to express what love means to you and why you feel that you love her. And this can just be to yourself. If you like to journal or any way that you like to process your thoughts, to challenge yourself to really figure out, okay, why do I love this person? How do I know that I love this person? And also how that love might be different from the other types of love that you described. So how do you know that you love this person more in a romantic context than a friend or any of the other kind of subtle variations that you might be thinking of? Now, that said, it doesn't always have to be super intellectualized, right? I'm asking you to sort of analyze this and intellectualize it, but it doesn't have to be. You could also just simply have a feeling in your body, or it could be, just an emotional experience. Or maybe it is hyper intellectual, right? Like there are a series of mental tests that you do. You're like, okay, my body reacts this sort of way. I find myself doing this thing. And, when I knew that I loved somebody else in the past, this sort of thing happened. And this person passes all of those checks. So therefore, I'm pretty sure that I love them. Whatever. It's personal. Like I said, it's subjective. Now, when it comes to the right time to tell somebody, like there's no real guideline here. I'd say like the first few days are probably not the best time, right? Unless you are very much that kind of love at first sight person. But in general, you're not going to want to do it that quickly. The first few weeks is still a little bit quick for a lot of people, but within a few months, that might be okay for some. That might feel way too quick for others, but within that range, you're going to see a lot of variation. So the right answer, I think, is when it's honest, right? When you really feel that way, when it's not driven by some specific moment of passion or a pressure from the outside or something like that, and when it feels right to you. That said, you may not ever feel like it's the perfect time. And so some of it may be, pushing yourself to feel like, okay, I want to do this. I'm never going to feel like it's the right time, but now is a good enough time. So, don't rely on that just right feeling. But, if it's honest, if it's not driven by something external and it's just the heat of the moment or something like that, and you feel okay with it, then go ahead. If you are feeling like in your situation, you may want to tell this person that you love them, I would assume that, since you've been presumably dating or seeing each other in some sort of capacity for a while, I bet they know you pretty well. And that means they know a bit about how your brain works. I'm saying this because, if you feel compelled to tell them that you love them, you can also be very honest about it. And you could be real about the way that your brain works, about how this is, not necessarily the most comfortable thing to feel out for you. You might even open up a conversation about it, right? Open up a conversation about the topic of saying that you love somebody or about love in general. You might share what you shared with me, right? About how you find the word love in English limiting compared to other languages, and just sort of open up that conversation just to learn more about how they feel about it. And on the honesty side, you can literally tell them what you've said here. You can say, I want you to know that I love you. And I have a hard time knowing when I'm supposed to say that because it seems like such a complicated thing, especially in English, especially because, I'm on the spectrum. I don't always understand these things, but I feel like I should tell you and I want you to know because I care about you and you're very special to me. Right. And just being honest about the fact that you don't exactly know if this is the right move, but you felt compelled to. That's okay. And with that, they might reciprocate. They might say nothing. They might say they're not ready, or they might react strongly if they have some sort of history that makes them a little bit hesitant to confess love to somebody. If they've been burned in the past or they have trust issues, any number of things can happen. And all of these are okay, right? You shouldn't say it with expectations. You should say it because you want them to understand how you feel, right? It's on your side. And even if you get a reaction that's different from what you were hoping for, that's okay. It doesn't mean that they don't love you or that they won't come to love you. It's just a reaction. Everybody has an initial reaction. And for all we know, it could be very positive. Except for rare circumstances where people coincidentally say it at the same time, there's always got to be one person that says it first, right? It has to be somebody. So, it's going to be one of you or the other of you, and it's going to be maybe a little bit weird feeling, maybe a little bit awkward, maybe a little bit scary. That's part of the human experience. But in the end, it's not really the biggest deal, right? If you two grow to love each other, that will be the case regardless of who says it and when, right? This is just one little milestone along the way. And looking back, it's not going to be the biggest deal in the end. So if it's important to you to get it off your chest, then go for it. You got this. Okay, and before we get into question number 2, let's take a quick break for our sponsor. Okay, this episode is brought to you by BetterHelp. I mentioned before, but I've been trying to connect with people more this year, and I have definitely been doing a bit of that. I feel like I thought last month was going to, be the last month where things were really busy, but it doesn't seem to be the case. And it's been important for me right now to start to look inward and pay more attention to my own social battery. It's very easy for us to spread ourselves thin, especially when the social gatherings pick up and there's just so many things that we can go to and engage with. But what's the right amount of socializing for you? How do you recharge? Do you find that you're thriving around people, or are you getting burned out and need some more alone time? These are all questions that are very personal. And one tool that's amazing to gain this self-awareness and learn how to build a social life that doesn't drain you is therapy. If you're thinking about giving therapy a try, check out BetterHelp. It's entirely online. It's designed to be convenient and flexible and suited to your schedule. You just fill out a brief questionnaire and that will get you matched with a licensed therapist. You can switch therapists at any time for no additional charge. So find your social sweet spot with BetterHelp. Visit betterhelp.com/duff today and get 10% off your first month. That's BetterHelp, HELP.com/duff. All right, so on to question number 2. It reads, "Hello, and thank you for all that you do. Your podcast and books have helped me in so many ways. Thank you. Today marks 2 years since my mother suffered a serious traumatic brain injury from a car accident. She was in a coma and intubated and had the worst coma score, I think that's what it's called, you can get. She made what could be referred to as a miraculous recovery and moved home and started working within months. She drives, works full-time, and has almost returned to her former self. One more issue that we can't seem to figure out is facial numbness. One whole side of her face and head are completely numb. She describes her nose as feeling closed and says that her tongue being partially numb makes eating unenjoyable. We can't seem to find any help for this. She's had an MRI and they didn't see anything wrong and everything appears to have healed well. Doctors haven't really given her the time of day because they say that she should be grateful for the life that she has. I'm trying to find any resources on this we could possibly find. If you know of any info on the topic, could you please share links or contact info for specialists, etc. For reference, we live in southeastern Pennsylvania. Thanks so much for reading my question and for all that you do." Well, first off, wow, holy crap, that's really scary. I'm super glad that your mother survived. Just for context, you mentioned coma score, and I think what you're referring to is what's called the Glasgow Coma Scale. This is a scale that we use to basically talk about somebody's level of consciousness, right? When they've had a head injury, when they might be in a comatose state, we use this, and it involves 3 different categories, which are then combined to provide an overall score. And if you have a lower score, that means it's worse and they are less conscious. If you have a higher score, that's better. So I'll talk about the categories just to give you an idea, right? So the first category is eye response. So a score of 4 on the high end, that means that you can open your eyes on your own and you can keep them open. As you get lower, a score of 2 means that you can only open your eyes in response to pressure. And a score of 1 indicates that your eyes don't open for any reason. And it goes all the way through 4, 3, 2, 1. I'm just not going to, read every single one to you. But yeah, so, it goes from higher to lower. And on the low end, it means you can't operate that thing at all. The next one is verbal responding. So a score of 5 means that you can answer questions about where you are, where you're at, the year, etc. A score of 3 means you can talk, but your responses to questions don't really make sense. And then a score of 1 would mean you can't speak or make sounds at all. And then lastly, you have motor response. A score of 6 means that you can follow instructions on how and when to move. A score of 3 means that you can flex your muscles in response to pressure. And a score of 1 means you don't move at all, even in response to pressure. So taking these together, the lowest score would be 3 and the highest score would be 15. And the range from 3 to 8 is considered a severe traumatic brain injury. So in the case of your mother, it sounds like she was in a full coma like you tend to see in movies, right? With little to no responding whatsoever and a very, very low Glasgow coma scale score. So the recovery that you described of her returning to work within months and being almost entirely back to her baseline, it is incredible, right? It's intense. And I'm so happy that she had the care and the luck for that to happen. Follow-up care after an injury is very, very important. And as well, there is a bit of luck there. People can recover, typically from a severe brain injury, you're going to see the most substantial improvement in the first year of recovery, but it's very likely that somebody in such a bad state wouldn't return to their previous level of functioning. So, of course, that's amazing and I'm very happy for her. But that said, there is this one significant lingering symptom that's causing her issues. And I'm glad that you asked about this because it highlights the fact that, what might be considered small symptoms can be huge for the individual, right? You mentioned this. People may say, like, she should be happy. She should be, really grateful. She could be dead or she could be completely paralyzed, but she's not. Obviously, that's true, but that doesn't change the fact that she is driven mad by the fact that she can't enjoy food, right? And she's just constantly feeling wrong physically. And those little things, those really dig at you. And it's such a change from your previous type of life that, it's a big deal. And I know it's super frustrating that, you're not being taken seriously by doctors regarding this issue. I'm sure that your mother is more than grateful, but she'd still like to enjoy her life, right? She was lucky enough to have her life preserved, and she has a second chance at it, and she wants to enjoy it. There's nothing wrong with that. Now, you mentioned the MRI showed normal results, and that's not totally surprising. So an MRI, or magnetic resonance imagery, is a great tool for looking at like vascular changes in the brain, blood vessel changes. So if you had, say, a stroke or something like that, or structural changes like atrophy, or softening of the tissue, which you can see after a brain injury. There's one part of your brain that's called the parietal lobe. It's kind of in the middle of your head. So if you like trace from your forehead back to the back of your head, basically around halfway between those two, you have your parietal lobe. And this part of the brain has to do with movement and also sensation. So damage to this part of the brain can definitely cause changes to sensation, including numbness. And maybe that's something that they're saying has been mostly ruled out by the MRI, right? They don't see any evidence structurally that there's anything wrong with the parietal lobe. So, they think she's basically healed. But an MRI isn't going to give you, precise information about other things like, say, the cranial nerves, because damage to the trigeminal nerve or the facial nerve, which are different cranial nerves, this can absolutely cause numbness and changes in sensation. Also, an MRI may not provide adequate detail to see changes in activity in areas of the brain rather than these sort of large structural changes, right? So what I would suggest would be to do some research and reach out to neurologists in your area. Depending on the kind of providers you have in your area, you may also need to extend your search. I'm not sure what your, geographic area has available. I didn't do that search for you. I'm sorry. But you can certainly talk with, your providers or try to get other advice regarding the kind of local deal. But in some places you might need to go to, neighboring towns or even farther away. So the reason I said you might want to seek out a neurologist is they can do additional diagnostics. They might do a nerve conduction study. This evaluates the electrical activity in muscles and nerves. So this can help tell, okay, is this a primary brain injury issue, or is this more of a peripheral nerve issue? Meaning, is it from the brain itself, or is it from the nerves in the face or around the face that are actually causing the problem? There are also other types of brain scans. So like a PET scan is a different type of scan that can show blood flow and metabolic activity in the brain. So essentially it highlights the areas that are not functioning as intended. This is one of the scans where you can see areas sort of light up. That would be a PET scan. And so even if they're not showing physical signs of damage, the metabolism might be lower, showing that it's not effectively using energy and something is not going right with that area of the brain. There are others too, right? There's a SPECT scan or a functional MRI. But this is something that a skilled neurologist would be able to dig deeper into, right? I'm throwing things out there. Not all of these are going to be relevant, but a skilled neurologist can look at the situation and say, okay, let's do another one of these or this, and that will help us clarify and get a more specific read on why this is an issue. So seeking out subspecialists within neurology and neurosurgery, that may be helpful to clarify what's going on. Spend some time and really get the research going for this. But then, once you find somebody, once you get more diagnostics, how do you actually address the issue? Obviously, this is something you're going to need to talk about with the doctor, with the specialist, and they can give you targeted suggestions. But there are things, right? There's a type of occupational therapy called sensory reeducation, where you basically try to train the brain to feel things normally again. They have a bunch of fancy techniques for this, and they can use it for a variety of things. For instance, people use it for tinnitus, like ringing in the ear. They use it for numbness. There's a variety of ways that it can be used, but that's one of them. There are also approaches that use electrical stimulation of nerves to kind of try to wake them back up. Some people find that acupuncture is effective. There are more things. So, while there's no sure bet that your mother will be able to reclaim the lost sensation in her face and in her mouth, it definitely sounds like there are still some stones that are unturned, some things that could be looked into. And, it makes sense for you to do your due diligence and just, try to see what you might be able to make happen before giving up on it. So I really appreciate that you're looking out for her and trying to do that. So yeah, those are kind of my thoughts about this. You're going to need to find some more specialists. If you need to go outside your geographic area, you might need to do that. But there are some more things that can be done on the diagnostic side and on the intervention side. So here's to a continued recovery and a better quality of life for your mom. And with that, that is the end of the episode. This was a pretty short one, but I think some good stuff in here. So thank you very much for listening. Don't forget to check out the website if you want to see the show notes or send me a question. Take care of yourselves, and I'll see you for the next one. Bye. Thank you so much for joining me in this episode. If you would like to send a question or a topic for a future episode, please email me at duffthepsych@gmail.com. If you like my approach and would like to learn more about my books, online course, or other resources, please head over to my website at duffthepsych.com. And lastly, it would mean so much to me if you would leave a review for the podcast wherever you listen to it, or share an episode with a friend. Until next time, you got this.